You're listening to Talking Trash with Team Venom.
Hi, and welcome to the season finale of season 3 of Talking Trash with Team Venom. I'm your host, Rory Bailey, joined with Andy Moore and Stephen Sowden, and a very, very special guest in one of my childhood heroes, the voice of Wolverine, Cal Dodd. Cal, it's an absolute honor to have you here. Thank you for joining us. The first thing I'd like to ask you is, there have been many reports recently that Disney are potentially looking to relaunch the X-Men animated series and continue it.
Season 6. They're talking about. Yeah.
They've
been talking a long time about this, by the way.
Oh, what are your thoughts?
But there's been a lot more in the last month than they've been talking about it for a year and a half.
Oh, okay.
But now the talk is really hot because the series is on streaming on Disney and it's their top series on the streaming thing, whatever. It's the top series for them. So now there's a whole new generation of young kids like you guys were when you watched it, are seeing it for the first time and they're loving it. So they're saying like, there's something to this then, because all the fans want to see the whole thing wrapped up in season 6 because it was just a cliffhanger at the end, and people go, "What? That's it?" And then we were gone. But now, so we can only hope. And I got everyone's like to go on Twitter and say, "Disney, pull your pants up. Let's get on with this." Oh, it's true because they're streaming this thing again, and we don't get a cent. We get nothing. We don't get 1 cent from these. We got paid 27 years ago for the 5 years that it was on. We haven't seen anything since then, and now Disney's just like, "This is beautiful." But so well, go ahead and like do the 6th season, and they want the original cast back, as many of them as they can get, like the ones that are live, because what is it? Cyclops won't be there, and Sabretooth died about 3 years ago now. Don Franks, God bless him, because I love fighting with him. And, but the rest of us are all, Beast, George Booth, and myself, Rogue, Gambit, all those guys. We're all eager and just want to get on with this and get it done, because it'd be so much fun to go back there and just wrap the whole thing up.
We want it.
Yeah.
I mean, let's go, back to right at the beginning. If you'd like to talk about the audition process, how what was the audition process like?
Sure.
What was it like working with the casting directors?
Can you hear me well enough?
Yes, we can.
Okay, because I have this huge microphone here that looks really professional. I don't know. See, look at this thing.
Oh, wow.
It's like the Johnny Carson microphone. So the audition thing, as and I'll tell you, because not one of us, the audition was called Project X, because they didn't want anyone to know what they were auditioning for. It was a big, huge secret. So all of us went in for whatever role, and they told me Wolverine. I just went because I had never done a voiceover. I was a singer for years on jingles and commercials and recordings. Just toured with Joe Cocker in '76 and stuff, with rock bands and stuff, and mainly did commercials in studios, for beer, for butter, for whatever, bras. She just sang everything to sell cornflakes, anything. And so it was a surprise to me that she said, well, they're looking for more actors, people that have been on, and I had a TV series for 5 years that was syndicated. It was in UK. It was all over, called Circus, from 78 to 83. So they wanted someone who had, and theater experience I've had as well, played Hamlet in a rock opera. So they wanted to expand because they knew that this cartoon, quote, this animated series, was going to be different than anything else that the kids had ever seen. And they didn't want it to write down, like the writers didn't want to write down to kids. And they said, because the people that thought, when they said they were going to do this X-Men thing, the people at Fox, well, was it going to be like, Bugs Bunny and like those guys? They said, oh no. You're so wrong, and we're not going to do that, because at one point they wanted Wolverine to wear Wolverine pajamas in animation, going to bed, whatever, so they could sell Wolverine pajamas. Marketing, like the marketing they wanted before we'd even done an episode. And they said, halt, cease and desist. We're not going anywhere in that direction. Wait till you see and hear what we've written. And that took them years. And by the way, this is I tend to get off track, but this is a book that Eric Lewald wrote called X-Men. And the making of the series. He was responsible for getting it to air, and it's what's the subtitle? Oh yeah, because before every episode, that came on after the it was like previously on X-Men, which was like a soap opera or something, which was never heard. You didn't hear that in Bugs Bunny, or So anyway, so they wanted people who were more experienced with theater and stuff like that to handle the stuff that they were going to write. So anyway, I went in. And I didn't know who he was. They said, Wolverine, no, I have no idea. So they showed me a picture of him. And the first line I had to read, I grew up in a little town in fishing town after, I was born in Ireland, but came over here when I was very young and grew up in a small fishing town on Lake Erie. And it was a tough town, and we played hockey and fought. And that was about it. So the line that they gave me for Wolverine, the very first one, because they've been auditioning for months at this point, and they were just getting really frustrated. And the line was, it's the very first thing I read for him. They said, here's what he is, and here's what he looks like, and we're thinking Clint Eastwood. What the heck? They named 3 or 4 actors. Not Robert Culp. Clint Eastwood, of course. I threw in a little Wolfman Jack. Steve McQueen they threw in, which I love, because he was a very quiet, calm, and inside himself serious actor, Steve McQueen. So I took on all these names they gave me, and so I'm trying to read like all of them at the same time, which is ridiculous. But when I looked at the line, it was immediate to me because I'd heard it so many times in my hometown from the guy that was my hero, who was like a tough guy and stuff, and did protected the rest of us. And the line was, and it was directed towards Sabretooth, of course. Duh. He said, so you like picking on people? You like picking on people smaller than you? Well, I'm smaller than you. Pick on me. And the people behind the glass from New York and LA that were there, the writers and stuff, just went, oh wow. Oh wow, give him more lines to read and stuff. And they threw out a whole bunch of other lines and stuff, like, namely, my favorite was, I know what you're thinking, punk. Question is, can I get Wolverine before he turns me into shish kebab with those claws? Well, bub, seeing as how these claws are adamantium, the strongest metal known, and can slice through vanadium steel like a hot knife through butter, buddy, you gotta ask yourself, do I feel lucky? And they just threw their hands up in the air, stood up and applauded. And they said, you can go, you can go now. And I left and heard from them the next night. And they said, you are our Wolverine. I said, okay then, whoever he is. And away we went from 5 years of bliss. Like what a wonderful character he was. And that was and the rest of the guys were like that too. They just said, well, we don't know who the characters were, but they were all serious theater actors. A lot of them had been in theater, like Rogue, Lenore Zan, and George Bouza. George Bouza had done like movies as well. And he's a big rough, he looks like Beast. Everyone looked like their character, is what they kept saying too, which was very odd. Like in the book, this is a wonderful book, by the way. He's just finished another one. But Eric was, he and his wife was a writer of the series too, Julia. And it's an unbelievable book. Any question you have is answered in that one, and if not that one, the next one that was just released this week. And I don't know what that one's called, but I'm getting a copy this next week. It's on its way. But can you still hear me if I back up like this?
No, you got a good mic.
So that was the audition process, and it was like I said, who is he? And they showed me like, well, then you see the pictures behind me and stuff, pictures like that. I know what I meant to show you. So I have this picture of our Prime Minister. This is Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada.
Yeah.
Right? So he was a huge fan of the show. And Jubilee, Allison Court, and I presented it to him. So she just turned from her. She gave him the book, and he shook her hand. And then, because I'm standing beside him with my Wolverine jacket on, the X-Men cast jacket, and he turns to me, and I hear him say, he says, "Well, I'll deal with Wolverine now." And because he said it that way, I got a hold of his hand, and I said, "Anytime, pretty boy." which is one of Wolverine's my favorite lines, and that's what this picture is from. It's like, "Anytime, pretty boy." Well, he just lost it, laughed, and I kept squeezing the crap out of his hand, and he can't stop laughing. So, and that was such a special moment. So, yeah, he's a huge fan of the show. So away we go, Disney, pitter patter, let's get at her.
Yeah.
Oh well. You've also kind of answered my first question there as well. I was going to ask about the process of finding Wolverine's voice. As you said, it was a mix between Clint Eastwood and all those other actors to give you the grounding.
The voice, you mean?
Yeah, getting
a mixture of
Clint Eastwood and
Clint Eastwood. I threw in. I don't know if you were familiar with Wolfman Jack. He was like a DJ way back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. I'm Wolfman Jack, baby. On the midnight special. He was a gravelly bearded, Greek beardy, and he was very popular and popular for a lot of records. He made the decision whether to play them or not. His name was Wolfman Jack, and I put part of him, like a lot of him, in it. And Clint Eastwood, of course, but that last speech I did was like from a Clint Eastwood movie. "I know what you're thinking, punk. Go ahead, make my day." That kind of stuff. And that's basically those two, and me, a bit of me, of course. Yeah. I'm sorry. So, Andy, Rory, and
Stephen. That's
right?
it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Stephen.
You have to excuse me because you have a strong accent, and which is wonderful. But here, cheers.
Cheers. So my next question was just going to be, obviously you mentioned how it was different. It was a different cartoon for the children.
Oh, yeah.
It was a bit more serious. There was overarching stories. I just wondered if you had any particular favourites.
Any particular favorite episodes?
Or storyline or episodes, yeah.
Yeah. I love the episode, and I always have a problem with his name. It's the one where he ends up going into the church at the end of the episode.
Nightcrawler.
Thank you. And I do this at Comic-Cons because it's one of those names. It's one of those names that I cannot remember. But it's my favorite episode. Is the Nightcrawler episode when the monks and the whole thing burns down and stuff, and Wolverine is like he's testing his own faith and lack thereof or whatever, because he just turned to Nightcrawler at one point and said, "So where's your God now? See, you let your God let them do this to them." He said, and of course in Nightcrawler, "They're only bricks and mortar. They're only bricks and mortar, Logan. Look through it with different eyes, Logan." Is that wonderful saying. And so Wolverine, he gives him some writings, and he gives him a book, a Bible, to read. And with some sections marked on it for you read these, So he's back in Paris, and he's in a church, and Rogue has left Gambit at a table because they are arguing or something, and she leaves the table and walks into this church, which has been closed for a while. She walks into the church, and she sees from behind Wolverine kneeling down and reading what Nightcrawler, the sections he had marked for him to read. And he's reading them out loud, and he's almost on the verge of tears. You can see in his face and stuff. But he's reading a very serious thing from the Bible, whatever, and it's hitting home to him. And then it turns away from Wolverine and goes to the back. And this is the very last shot, is of Rogue standing at the back of the church, and she's got a tear coming down her eye. Which now that's a serious episode. And they were like that for kids. And the writer said they had to make that decision to kill the second episode, or the first or second episode he died, Morph. So, and that was a huge thing. The critics said, you can't, what are you doing killing people off? Like, you can't, well, he just got here. You can't. Well, they said we are, because children are going to lose people in their lives at some point. We're not writing down to them. We're just, this stuff happens, shit happens. And more people are going to die that are close to you and you love. And because they just hated it when he died. The fans went ballistic. They started writing in letters and stuff, and they brought him back for a minute, and then he left for good. But that episode, and I also liked anything that Wolverine, especially when he left, after he leaves, after Jean catches him and he's just outside with Cyclops' car, and he rips the hood off the car and tells Cyclops I made him a convertible. And he takes off and goes up north, upper Canada, to go skiing and whatever. And he meets the Eskimos, and he stays with them. And the one and only time he ever laughed, I didn't know what to do. They said, "Well, you have to laugh." And I just remember my buddy back home, and his laugh was like, ha, 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 a really hearty laugh. When they were throwing him up in the blanket, he's got to go, whoa! Wolverine, that's the only time he ever laughed. And he sits down with the chief of the tribe, of the Indians, the Eskimos, and he says, "Thank you so much, Logan." And he grabs and he opens up his backpack and he takes out his mask because he didn't know if he was ever going to go back to being Wolverine with the X-Men and stuff. And he says, "You must return. You have work to do. So he said, "You have work to do, my friend." And he walked away. And this last shot of Wolverine, and he just says, "You called me friend." No one ever called him friend. "You called me friend." And he was so taken with it, and it just faded. And that's when he pulls his mask out and puts it in his hand. And that was the end of that episode. So that was one of my favorites too. But the Nightcrawler one for sure.
You voiced Wolverine in not only the X-Men animated series, but also virtually every video game that was running at the time. And you also put in appearances in the Spider-Man show. You're essentially, to many people that grew up in that era, including myself, you're the definitive voice for Wolverine. And I know you mentioned that you weren't sure who he was before the casting and stuff, but have you since ended up being a fan of the character, or
of
Wolverine?
Of Wolverine?
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. But there was no one before me. There was some guy from Australia for about one episode in black and white, and they just said when they saw this Australian voice from a guy that was supposedly come out of Canada, back off, Mike. That's all right, Beb. Like, no, it didn't work at all. So that lasted for about 2 episodes. No, there was never. I gave him his voice and was the voice of Wolverine for 5 years. You mean the Capcom stuff? And
yes, yeah.
Like Marvel versus Capcom. And I recall very little of doing that because it's so repetitive, and it's just like lines doing whatever the heck he even said in them, like snake down, it's just weird things. But the kids loved them. I mean, everyone loved those games, and they all mentioned them at the Comic Cons, and I'm just like, okay, all right then, because I don't recall a lot of it because like I said it was just repetitive work and whatever.
Yeah.
I much prefer an episode.
I mean, speaking of episodes and sort of like the things that you got to do, what were some of your favorite lines? Which line is the one you're most asked to do at, say, a Comic-Con? Did you ever get to ad-lib any of those lines?
Did I ever get to what?
Ad-lib.
None of the ones that were famous lines of his, no. But the only ad-lib, the only time I corrected them because they were American, and they would put in, huh. So, what's up, huh? And Canadian would never say that. We say A. I said, no, it would be like, no, back off, A. No, back off, huh? Back off, A. But no, I didn't write any of those. They were just, the writing was brilliant. There's nothing I could add to it. Just my attitude and delivering it exactly the way I knew that he would. Because I've heard all those lines, like I told you. Anytime, pretty boy, you want to dance? Dance with me. Sure. And I was astounded because I just started watching it again on Bluetooth, and I got the whole 5 years, and I just laughed my arse off like that because Wolverine had the greatest lines and the funniest lines and the most inane lines at the most inane times. But again, to Cyclops when he says. Professor, because Cyclops is always like Mr. Captain America to me, I'm the teacher's pet. That's what you are, pal. Professor Xavier's little pet. You're the leader, you know. Yeah, right. Lead yourself. And he said something to, well, we're supposed to go in and do this. And he just says, I go where I want to go, period. I go where I want to go. And he said it in the first 2 episodes, that line, and anytime, pretty boy. I don't know. My favorite is the one that I did. I know what you're thinking, punk. And this the inanity of, it was like, again, the 2nd episode or something. They're looking for Jubilee, and she has just arrived at the home, and she's missing or something. So they're all rogue and beast. They're all running around the property looking for her. And Wolverine jumps down from a tree, and they just look around and they said, "Did you see her? Did you find her?" No, the scent went cold outside that mansion. And then he just adds, for no reason, he just says, "Got bit by a dog too." What? Who asked you that? Nothing. I just thought it. No, the scent went cold out of things. Got bit by a dog too. Like, feel sorry for me? It was just that kind of insanity. And the stuff with Captain America when he first meets him in Paris again, and it's back before he had his claws. And Captain America saves him. He's fighting a bunch of German soldiers during the Second World War. And he's doing a search for this woman's father who the Germans have captured or something. And so that's his job. And he and Captain America get because he's fighting a bunch of them. And it's Captain America's shield comes flying and saves him. And he says, "Thanks, bub." Wolverine's name, Logan. He says, "Yeah, I'm Captain," because he's Captain America's dressed in like the stars and stripes and the big shield. And there's no, he said, "I'm Captain America." And Wolverine says, "You're kidding." No. And he says, "Where'd you get that garb?" And then he gives them these things because they're going to crawl up a cliff. He gives them like things exactly like this. And he says, "What are I supposed to do with these?" Which is very funny because Wolverine ends with them permanently happy. But he says, "Well, we can climb up the mountain better if we." Oh, so he's halfway. He says, they're halfway up the cliff, and he's because he must be bored just climbing up the cliff. And he turns to him and says, "What's that get up made out of anyway?" Like, what's that get up made out of? And he says, whatever he says, back to him says, and he goes on for a few more things, and he says, "It's gotta itch. It's gotta itch." Mr. Tough Guy, it's gotta itch. But he just had the greatest non sequiturs, and I just loved him for that. It was just fantastic. Funny guy. So yeah, I have lines. I wish I'd like brought out a sheet of them because when he's fighting with, no kidding, with Sabretooth, you know, and Sabretooth throws him over a cliff, and he lands in this cold water, and he's hanging on to a slab of ice, big slab of ice. Wolverine and what's his name? The Lionhead. Whatever. I just said his name. Jesus, Mary and Joseph. Sabretooth is still yelling. He won't shut up. He's just like, "You never were as tough as I, Wolverine. You'll never come back. You'll never find me." And Wolverine is floating on the, he says, "At least I won't have to listen to your flapping mouth anymore." I love it. He was just the best character ever.
Characters. Is there any other superheroes or villains that you would ever fancy putting your voice to?
Pardon?
Are there any other superheroes or villains that you would like to voice?
I'm just trying to turn up this thing, but that's me. Can you say? I'm sorry. One more time.
Sorry, no, it could be my mic. I'm just saying. Are there any other superheroes or villains that you ever fancied voicing? Been the voice for another hero or villain?
No, because as I say, which is why it was so astounding. Is that I had never done. I had done no voiceovers. One Chrysler commercial, I think I'd done like voice, because I told you I was a singer, and so as I told, so that I had done a commercial for Chrysler cars, and as a singer, and there were about 5 of us singing, and they said one of us needed to be the sergeant who was like, you know, the soldiers marching. The other soldiers respond. Yeah, so my line was, and I did it like this. Who's got all the 4x4s? You know, big, gruff, gravelly voice. Fleischer's got the 4x4s. Loud up. Somebody remembered that I had done that singing thing, and not, you know, I'd never done a voiceover, and he called me and said, "Would you like to be the voice of Chrysler?" Gee, yeah. Well, duh. I mean, it's a huge car, and you know, it's like super money to get a car ad or whatever. So they gave me that, and that was my very first voiceover. And then they called me for this X-Men thing. So it was very odd. So when I went into the studio to work with the rest of them, they were all voiceover people. Norm Spencer, all of them. George Booza, they had been doing commercials, you know, voiceovers for years. And I had been the singer. I would never see them, you know, because the singers don't see the other rest of that talent. So it was very cool, and walking in, but I was not afraid, but it was just like I felt out of my league because these were all guys that had done this before. And I have to tell you this story. So we're all in the studio together. So there's myself, Norm, who played Cyclops, George Booza, Jubilee, Rogue, and Jean Grey, and Professor X. So the guys say, see, if you do your episodes, you get paid so much money. If you do another voice on the episode, you get paid half again of what you made. So it's like a real good incentive. It's like, holy crap. And it only has to be one line. And you get half your money again, like your money and a half plus a half. So everyone was, you know, eager to do that. So there's one episode, it's the episode where Wolverine's in the pool hall, and he's these three tough guys, you know, that are waiting with at the pool table. They're supposedly playing with him, but on the TV screen is a newscast, the Friends of Humanity, and whom he can't stand, of course, and Wolverine, but he's not dressed in like this. He's like as a normal human being, except he's got the weird hair, and they kind of find this kind of weird. But anyway, he's taking a shot, and he looks up at the TV because he hears them complaining about mutants and stuff, and he says, "Shut that garbage off." And they said, "What's the matter, pretty boy?" Well, anyway, so one of the guys, and they, you know, he ends up taking them all on, and that's the end of that. But so they wanted someone to voice those three rough guys in that particular scene. So they said to any of us, they said, "Does anyone do Jack Nicholson?" So Norm Spencer says, "Yes, I'll do that for you." And it's like Captain America voice, you know, Cyclops voice, and I'll do that for you. So I listened to him. And I'd been known, I do many voices and have for years. And I heard when he finished, I just looked inside, and they just went, "Okay." And I just put my hand up, and they said, yes, Cal. I said, "Would you mind if I read for that too? Because it's really upsetting when I hear him do it just like that. It's like a bug is up his ass." And they just lost it. He said, "You got it, Cal. You got the line." And Norm's, this is the first time he said anything to me, and we've just met. But he's a funny guy. He just turned to me and said, well, the F-bomb. He just turned to me and said, "Oh, F off." like, way to go. But it was just perfect the way he said it. Why don't you just off? And we got together tremendously after that, even though, you know, in the show they hated each other's guts. But yeah, so no, I didn't want to voice, no. And I've talked to Kevin Conroy, who did Batman. I mean, I talked to him. I was on a conference call with him and Rob Paulson for a project that they were going to put the three of us together called The Gang's All Here. And the guy has written the episodes and stuff, and I was going to be a character much like, no, it wasn't going to be anything like Wolverine. And Kevin Conroy was going to be a bear. We were all animals of a sort. And after Paulson was going to do whatever other animals there were, and then they were going to introduce eventually a character, a Wolverine, into the thing, so I could voice that thing as well. So that's still in the working. They're still working on that, getting that series, and it's called The Gang's All Here. So like Batman, Wolverine, and Paulson, who did, you know, all kinds of voices.
That's awesome.
So
Speaking of your voice work, growing up, one of the things that I was a big fan of was the Goosebumps series.
Sorry?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Rory?
When I was growing up, one of the things that I was a big fan of was the Goosebumps series. And I used to read all the books and then the TV show. And you famously voiced Slappy the dummy from in Goosebumps. And I know you've spoke about your process for getting the voice of Logan. How did you get the voice of Slappy?
Again, they just had auditions for that again. And that voice, we'll talk about two different voices. My God, I mean, Wolverine's down here and like back up and all that stuff. But Slap, no, there's none of him there. But Slappy is like totally...
No, you'll be my slave. Now you will always be. You will be my slave forever.
You know, that kind of a voice. It was a mean, weird sounding little
Squeaky
voice. And I just got it. And he said, well, let's go. Here we go. But that was different because they did my voice after they shot everything, because there was real live action in Goosebumps with real actors. And then there was, it was all real actors. And then the puppet, Slappy, I would have to, the lines would come across the screen and it's called looping. And as soon as they hit was when whatever my line was.
You can't do that to me. You're crazy. You and your mom, you'll never get this.
You know, and I'd have to start and sort of like try and lip sync with the way his mouth was moving. So it was very challenging in that respect. And I had no idea it was going to be that wacky and successful. But like Slappy is like, people either love him or hate him. Like women just like freak out. The women in the bar, they're like, oh, it's just like, stop, don't do that. I can't stand that voice. It's just like,
okay, so now I know how to get a hook on your nerves.
And then they say, and you were Wolverine? Yeah, that's right. You got a problem with that? Yeah.
I mean, you said that you actually started as a singer. So when you started that, and even when you did the voiceover commercial for Chrysler, did you ever think you would become an icon to geeks around the world at that point?
No,
and I like to become that.
I couldn't believe it, Andy. Like, yeah, they had to talk me into doing. I've only done Comic-Cons now for 2 years, maybe, and 2 years and a bit, maybe. No, 2 years. And the first one was here in Toronto, and it was like in a small suburb of Toronto, Mississauga, and it was in a hotel, and there was just myself and a professional wrestler, an ex-professional wrestler, who were signing at this thing. And then there was all the toys and stuff, that was a whole gymnasium full of those people, they have their goods and the stuff that they make and their comics and all that stuff, and toys of like Wolverine and all that. And I had no idea. I said, I don't know. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what. He said, well, there'll be a handler there to help you, like his assistant. He talked me into doing it. So, and I was there from 10:30 in the morning until 4:30. And that was it. I drove there, my wife, and we sat there for that many hours and came home. And I went, I couldn't get over it. That was, like I say, the beginning. I couldn't get over how sincere the fans were, and like how, like, sincere is a great word, because they just, and so smitten, and they couldn't believe, like, I can't believe, lined up, and they said that they can't. I watched them lining up, and they just can't believe, because they'll hear me talking to someone else, and they'll just get giddy. They'll just like, oh, and I'm going to meet him next. Like, he was my hero growing up. Everyone would say, I have to thank you for making my childhood. You made my childhood. And he said, you saved my life. A lot of them said that, you saved my life. And there are stories of kids that, who were teased and stuff like that were going to give up. And their only hope was staying alive so they could watch the X-Men on Saturday morning or whatever. But I couldn't get over how sincere they were. And I didn't know how to handle it. This one kid came up to me in Tennessee, kid, and he had his daughter who was about 12 with him, 12 or 13, and they were both dressed like in black, and he had the claws on, the Wolverine claws, And he sat, so she came with his daughter, and he stood in front of my table, and he said, my name is such and such, I have autism, and this is my daughter, and she's autistic as well. And he said, he went on for 2 minutes about how touched he was and how he was still alive. And the reason he was alive was because of X-Men and Wolverine and the show. And he couldn't express it to me, like what it meant to him, that like he couldn't. It's just unbelievable. He was like shaking, and he just said, and I couldn't not speak to you. I had to tell you that we loved you, and you made my childhood, and the reason I'm alive is because of your character and the X-Men series. And his wife was, I didn't know who she was at the time, but she was standing off to the side. And he's with that, no, so he had, like he said, he had that claws on. So I put my hand out like this naturally. I said, because whether they wanted a picture taken, and they did eventually. I put my hand out, so he took one of the claws off and shook my hand. And then they turned and they walked away. You know, just he and his daughter just walked away. And this woman came running back to the table. She's in tears, and she said, I cannot believe, Mr. Dodd, what I just saw. He has never, because of the autism part, he has never touched another human being in his life. Another person. He does not like physical contact whatsoever. And I lost it. I said, oh my God. And, you know, because he wanted to shake the hand of his hero. So then that happens all the time. And it just blows me away. Just blows me away, Andy.
I mean, I would not be an X-Men fan today without the series. And yeah, a lot of those similar emotions, yeah, found very similar to my reasonings behind everything, and my personal love for what you guys did. And yeah, as I say, I wouldn't be a fan today if it weren't for the X-Men series.
No, I know. And, well, oddly enough, me too. I mean, that's not a dumb thing to say, but it's true. Because I didn't know who he was, but I fell in love with this character and like everything that they were about, because kids going to school. And what was cool about it too is that girls and boys loved the X-Men, because there was Jean, there was Rogue, and Rogue was probably the toughest of all of them. She could fly, for God's sakes, too. Who else flew? No, nobody but Rogue. And Jubilee for like the younger ones. It was just, you know, everyone had someone they could hang on to, and they were all frowned upon because they were mutants. And like, you know, a lot of kids going to school, well, you're too fat. No, look at you, you're fat. You know, why is your hair that color? That's stupid. No, what's stupid is you're stupid. You know, and that kind of stuff. And getting back at those bullies and stuff. I couldn't get over it. It was just fantastic animated series, because that ain't no cartoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just fabulous.
With your love for Wolverine, who would you like to portray him next in the next live action film, if and when he joins with the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Who?
I said, who would you like to portray Wolverine if and when he was to join the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Is this a movie thing, or on a bit movie?
Yeah,
because because Hugh's through. Hugh's done. He doesn't want any more part. He can't. He just doesn't want to do it anymore. Good Lord. Wow. I don't know which. Well, since Hugh Jackman has portrayed him, because when the first movie came out, they wanted him to meet me, Hugh, before he started shooting the first movie, and they told him, you have to listen to this animated series. You have to listen to Cal Dodd's voice. The only reference for children that are going to be going to this movie as they were growing up is his voice. And they would, I'm sure, like to hear a bit of that in the character. And he said, yes. So we were introduced that night at the things that, Hugh, this is Cal. Cal said, oh, pleasure to meet you, Hugh. And he said, I meet you, Mike. But I got to tell you, I'm sick and tired of listening to your voice. And I said, well, I hope you listen to it. Now, don't you mess up, Bob. And he said, no, I won't. I'll try my damnedest. And, you know, and he left. But it was like, so now he's at a one-man show that he's just finished, like touring, singing and dancing. Which when I first saw, I said, no, don't do that. Don't be dancing. Wolverine doesn't dance. No, when I first was like, don't be dancing. And geez, and there he goes dancing and singing. Well, that's what I did. I mean, I didn't dance. I was a singer. So it's like he's following me around, this Jackman dude. So because I did the voice of Wolverine. Hey, I think I'll play that voice in a movie. So he did, and then what does he do? So and now he's singing. And what's the last movie he did? And I had a TV show called Circus, which was, we had a circus dressed with the circus hat, the red jacket, the boots up to here for 5 years, syndicated worldwide. My cousin saw it in Ireland. And his last movie was a circus-based movie. Oh,
Yeah.
geez. Geez, you gotta stop following me. So, yeah. So I don't know. I don't know who, because now, oh yeah. So when I saw it for the first 5 minutes of the movie and he showed up, I looked at him and, because I'm thinking of this guy, like not that's not really what he looked like, you know, but 5'3" and built like a fire hydrant. 5'3", that's Wolverine. Excuse me, not 6'3". And
Yeah.
you know, I didn't. Wow. And I left. I said, I can't watch this. I don't know that person. So, but I now have seen him watch that. Yeah, but I've seen them all now. Not all. I've seen a couple of them, and there I just don't know what to say. But he does a fantastic job. I mean, he's unbelievable. He's an actor, and he does that, and he did it well for what that is. But they're oranges and apples. Apples and oranges. One's an animated series, and this is real life stuff. So, but I seriously don't know who would play Wolverine. And that's going to be a huge undertaking for whoever does that job.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, after Jackman and stuff, and like people are used to that. I don't know. Is there talk of that? They're still talking about doing something like that, right? Like
yeah,
the universe tomorrow.
Rebooting all the X-Men and tying them into the Avengers films.
Yeah. So I don't know. Do you have any ideas of who? I remember some ridiculous names that people brought up, and they were like, one of them was a like short, stubby comedian, and I can't remember who they said. So not Buddy Hackett or something. It was something like ridiculous like that. Buddy Hackett would make a good Wolverine. Yeah. No. Good Lord.
I have heard Keanu Reeves being mentioned, but I think he's too
He's too thinny.
Yeah.
He's thin faced. No. No.
Someone short and rough.
Yeah.
Tom Hardy.
Tom Hardy. He has been mentioned, actually. Another English gentleman with a strange name like Peregrine or something like that. There we go.
He played Elton John recently, didn't he, in that Rocket Man?
Oh yeah. I met him.
Yeah, so I know
Elton
his
John's
name's been touted.
Did he's the actor that played Elton John?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was at my agent, because we were down at LA Comic-Con. We were there, so we stayed for another 3 days, and because he knows Elton, just kept playing it and learned piano by ear. And so they brought me to the Paramount Studios in Los Angeles, and with 300 other people, a private screening of his movie, Rocket Man. And guess who was there after the movie to answer questions? Elton, Bernie Taupin, the writer, and the stars, that kid that you're talking about. What was his name?
Taron Egerton.
Yes. Yeah, and he was a wonderful, wonderful kid. He won the award for that, didn't he not?
Yes, I believe he's
Yeah.
won a few for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd
be interesting.
Yeah.
But with you just saying about Hugh Jackman and having seen all those films now, what did you think to his performance and how his character arc ended?
What did I think of Hugh's performance as Wolverine, you mean?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, no, I loved it. I thought it was fantastic once I got by the height thing and everything, and I seriously watched him and his acting and stuff, not that I know anything about it. It was just still, I thought he was fantastic. And so on this one-man show that he did as well, that he just wrapped up about a month ago or a month and a half, he would say he always gave a shout out. In the show, he would stop at a certain point. He'd spend like 2 or 3 minutes talking about Wolverine because they wanted him to do that between singing and dancing. So we would always give a shout out. I got a shout out to the original voice of Wolverine in the animated series, who I was forced to listen to. For hours, Cal Dodd, and he gives a great shout out like that, which is wonderful, and I think that's really nice of him and kind. So I thought he was a fantastic guy, and like I said, I can't really comment, Rory, because I've only watched probably 1 episode, like 1 movie. The other ones I didn't buy. I couldn't. I had no interest.
Fair enough.
One last question from myself. You got to work with so many great voice actors, as you say. All of the voices in X-Men are just so iconic, from Beast, Rogue especially, Storm was another, Gambit, so iconic. What was it like to work with all those guys? Did you actually record separately or in a studio at one time on a table read?
No, the very first, like I said, probably the first 4 months. So probably the first 4 episodes we did all together in the studio. And then it got to be crazy for the recording engineer, because he said, I'm getting leakage, spillage over into his mic and into her mic. And it was silly because we'd have to wait, like you'd give the 2 or 3 beats. Like especially when I was fighting, I keep saying Cyclops. What's his name? Thanks. What's his name? Sabertooth. Yeah. And I'd be fighting it because you can't really stop as you're pushing, and you'd punch, and go like wait for 2 beats and go like ooh. So, finally they had to separate us, and eventually what ended up, we wouldn't even see each other anymore after the first 4 episodes, unless it was like that. And I would work with Don Franks, the 2 of us doing the fight scenes. You had to. Because like, again, it's getting spillers. The engineer was like, this is a nightmare, in post, trying to get people's quiet asides would get buried by someone giggling. And so I would just go in by myself, do all my lines. Rogue would go in and do all her lines. You might see them as they came in to go in after you, you were there. But, as I said, these were kids and people that had done voiceovers for a long time. And I didn't see any of them because I was a singer. I saw my crowd were all singers. So I didn't know Chris from A Hole in the Ground. Then he went on to do major series, Kung Fu. He did the Kung Fu series, and he's got a series in Canada here now that he's had for 20 years. And he's still doing it, but and he just started doing the Comic-Cons too. They got him involved on the last 2 we did. He actually came to Wales, Chris. That was he and Lenore, who is Rogue, and myself, and George Booza. So 4 of us were there in Telford. So, and they didn't impress me. They're just voiceover people. Yeah, except that voiceover people always got 1.5 scale at least, if not double scale. Singers never got more than scale for anything. If I would do Tom Waits. I would do Michael McDonald impersonating them, vocals for, or Little Richard or anything for a certain spot or something, for a hamburger, McDonald's or something, they wanted it to sound like, so I'll do that, no problem. I still couldn't get 1.5 scale for that. I said, well, get someone else then. If that's not important to you, I thought it was important to you, and it became a big deal. Well, you're only a singer. I said, no, they're only voiceovers. That would do is we would sing for an hour for Molson Export Ale, for example, beer, Molson. And we'd sing for an hour. Molson X. In would walk the voiceover guy, and at the time it was Donnie Burns, and he'd just walk up to the microphone after we'd been there for an hour for a piddly penny that they're paying us. And he would walk in and say, Molson X, great ale. Molson X, great ale. Thank you, you can go, Mr. Burns. And he has twice the money we made. 5 minutes, he's done. Hello. So I was happy to get into voiceovers because it would be twice the money, you know, if you can get work.
So, out of your co-stars, are there any of them that are your favourites and you're still in touch with nowadays, or
with whom?
your co-stars from the animated series?
Yeah, George, Lenore. Lenore's a member of Parliament now with Mr. Trudeau in Nova Scotia. So I don't see her, but I see George at auditions, for other jobs, voiceover stuff in town. Norm, Cyclops, I would see. Who else? Just funny. Jubilee, Alison Court. When I had the TV show, I moved into this area that I'm in now, and I didn't know, but a little girl lived across the street. She was like 8 or 9. This is a great story. So 8 or 9 years of age, and her little friend next door. Because I was a star in Canada, because I had the circus TV show, and it was a great show. It was like literally lions and tigers, elephants, trapeze artists, the Wallendas, like huge circus acts. And then we would have singing numbers. We had 6 dancers, and we would do a production number like, speaking of Michael McDonald, taking it to the streets or something, taking it, whatever. I'd sing one week. Charisse, the girl who had a co-host, Charisse, it was like Donnie and Marie Osmond, the show. So I was, of course, Donnie, she was Marie. And then we had Billy Van as a clown on the show, but Donnie, he played like 8 different roles. As soon as I moved to the neighborhood, so these are little girls, and they would always be sitting on the curb when I came out, and they would, just happen to be there because they would just wave and go, "Oh, Mr. Dodd, how are you?" This is Alison Court and her little friend. So, I don't think anything like that. And so 10 years later, I'm in the studio for the first time, and I look across, and it's Alice, and I said, "What are you doing here?" She said, "I'm Jubilee." And I said, "Get out of here." And so here we are, the little one that had a crush on me when she was 8 or 9. Now she's Jubilee and I'm Wolverine. And we went on 5 years craziness with that little one. So, and that's just a great story. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I see her. Oh yeah. So, and that comes around to, so now she's directing, voice directing cartoons. Corn and Peg. I don't know if you've heard of that, but I did a couple. So now she's directing me in the cartoons that she's doing, which is just ridiculous. But she was 9, for God's sakes. Anyway, so so her and George I see, but that's about all I see. Like lately is George Booza, Beast.
He was so good at Beast. Was such a great character in this series.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Excuse me.
Right.
Okay. Well, we'll wrap this up because I've just realized we're around about the hour mark. So thank you very much for joining us. It's been absolutely awesome talking to you. And I know that Andy and Stephen have said before that they became friends over their love of the X-Men when they were kids. Isn't that right?
Wow.
So I think
That's true.
if there's bits where we're all, and I used to religiously watch every week and such as well. So I know that if there's bits that we all sound a bit nervous, it's because you were legitimately one of our favourites growing up. So it's and really on here. So
I loved you guys are fantastic, and I love doing this stuff. And this is in place of like being there and like meeting people and like what is going to happen with that anymore? Like I can't see the future of Comic-Cons. I can't see it'll ever be the same. You can't shake hands now and or like let alone hug and kiss little people and stuff. Good Lord, and like that's why I have 10 canceled this year. 10 different countries, 10 different places in the States, wherever, and canceled because of the COVID. And I don't think it'll ever be the same. I don't know how they can get back to that. That many people all lined up this close together. It's just crazy. So this is what we have to do now is this Zoom stuff, and you guys are great at it. It was a lot of fun for me today to do this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing back
and look at the pictures.
memories.
You see the pictures I got? Oh, and look, and of course you got Wolverine here. This lunatic over here. Back off, bub. Yeah.
See, I hear the voice and I can see it in my mind, and I can see the episodes when you were doing certain ones.
Yeah.
It's such an honor.
Well, thank you so much, Andy. And Stephen, thank you, buddy.
No, thank you. Like Andy said, the same. But if I read the comics, it's your voice as Wolverine whenever he comes on.
I love that. That's weird. I mean, it's just that.
Yeah.
That's like, wow. Because I mean, all the kids say that. It's your voice I hear when I read the cartoons.
Yeah.
God.